Hey everyone, this is Rob from Mr. Robot Shop. I am going to talk about the Tandy color computer tonight. I'm going to turn this down real quick here. Anybody that's owned a color computer, or a Radio Shack color computer, or TRS-80 color computer, essentially the same thing, probably owned this game at some point. It's called Dungeons of Daggerith, and arguably one of the best games that was ever made for the color computer. I believe the first Coco, or color computer, Coco is short for color computer, had 4K if I'm not mistaken, and then 16, 32, 64, and 128K. But if I'm not mistaken, this game actually worked on a 4K Coco. And given the fact that there's lots of different, we'll call them monsters just for the sake of a better word, and 5 levels, it's absolutely amazing. 4K would be 4,000 characters that they could write code of, all these different mazes, weapons, attack patterns. It literally blows my mind the how can I put this, intricacies of this game based on the little amount of RAM and memory that they had to use to actually program the game. So that it just amazes me to this day. So anyways, for anybody that either owned a Coco or wants to purchase one, just to have one in their vintage computer museum or collection, I want to give you a couple hints. I'm going to try to keep this as short as I can. I made another video last night that ran about 30 minutes, and when I watch YouTube videos, if they go much more than 5-10 minutes, I get a little bored. So I'm going to try to keep this one down. I'm doing this one on the fly, so if I say something inaccurate or stutter, or my words aren't quite right, just deal with it. We don't need critics out there complaining about silly things like that. So anyways, what I'm going to do, here's the Coco that I do have. I did have the first version, the gray one, when I was, probably 10, 11, 12 years old. And then my dad purchased the 64K version. We ended up getting the disk drive, a printer. I ended up doing my homework on there. Word processing was a dream compared to typing papers, because I was never good at typing. But with word processing, obviously you could go back and edit it. The things you're seeing here are the cartridge games. These are just pretty much my top ones that I've liked since I was a kid. I'm almost 50 years old now, if that'll give you an idea. In 2017, what, 30, 40 years old almost? That's pretty scary. Anyway, Star Lifeline, Double Back, Canyon Climber, and of course my favorite, Dungeons of Daggerith. So these essentially would plug into the side here. You turn it on, the computer would instantly load it up. It was basically like an Atari 2600 or a Nintendo game. Loads it off ROM, very quick access. And then back in the day, if you couldn't afford the cartridges, which usually ran 30 to 50 bucks, you could use a cassette tape to load and save your games on. So you would either type in games on the keyboard from books or magazines, or you could actually buy games on tape. And then once you had the big bucks, you could actually upgrade to a floppy disk, which used a 5.25-inch drive. Here's actually a floppy disk controller. It would go into the side here just like the cartridges, and then the floppy disk would plug in the side here. And then it was actually a big white box with a floppy drive inside. Excuse me. And access time on the floppies were much faster than cassette. Obviously, I don't know the baud rate on cassette compared to the floppy access time, but it was probably at least 4 or 5 times faster. So but what I'm going to recommend that you do if you want a color computer, I'm not going to recommend that you go worry about, floppy disk and trying to move all the files over to a floppy disk. And the reason why I say that is that floppy disk drives right now, given the vintage, the heads are going to be out of alignment, discs are going to be bad, belts, everything just fails over time. So I'm actually going to recommend going back the cassette way, okay? And when I say that, it's not that we're actually going to use a cassette, but we're going to use the cassette file could be turned into a WAV file. And a WAV file is a kind of like a pre-MP3 audio file that can be saved on a any type of computer. That's actually what I have here, this little Acer. It's like a netbook. It's not really a full-fledged computer, a little Atom processor. But you don't need anything real powerful. So what I'm going to recommend, if you want to do this, get yourself a color computer, at least a Coco 2, 64K. You don't need the Coco 3. Unless there's a few games that run on Coco 3 that didn't run on the Coco 2, but most of the best games were pretty much on the Coco 2. And some of the games that ran on the Coco 2 would run on Coco 3, but the graphics weren't the same, the colors were off. So, there's a lot of people that want the Coco 3s, but personally, I think the Coco 2s are really just the best way to go. Just get yourself a couple of these joysticks. They do have the self-centering and the free float deluxe joystick, they called them, but they tend to break. These pretty much, if you get a good set, will last a lot longer. Okay, you don't have the self-centering, which can be an issue on some games, but you can deal with it. So the other thing you're going to want is the 5-pin DIN connector to cassette recorder cable. Okay, and what that is essentially is you have these 3 connectors here. Now you're only going to use the black connector. That's going to hook up to your audio output on your laptop or PC. It doesn't make any difference what you use. I guess technically you could even use like an iPad or an Android tablet, because you're just going to play a WAV file through the computer or device over to your Coco. All right. So I actually found a website. I don't remember the website name, but I got in touch with the person that had the website up. Excuse me, allergies are killing me this year. But anyways, I was able to download all the ROMs, which were each individually zipped up in a zip file, which is not a big deal, but when you're talking a couple hundred games, it takes quite a bit of time to unzip each one and then convert them into a WAV file, because you had to use a special program to do that. So I'm not going to mention a name or the website because I don't know the name or the website, but I sent him an email and he was kind enough to actually extract all the files or send them to me, convert them over to WAV file, and then send them in one giant zip file, which I was just able to unzip via email. And so I got all the games that he had on the website just in one file, which was easy to do compared to using, I can't remember the name of the file. It's actually a DOS level file that you needed to convert the CAS file to a WAV file. And it wasn't complicated, but when you have hundreds of files, it took quite a bit of time. So some of you may ask, well, why are we going to use cassette files over, disk files? Well, disk files were not audio files. It wasn't analog per se. It was actually kind of more a digital. I guess that's kind of in between there. But anyways, you can take a cassette file, load it into the Coco, and it's essentially a WAV file, and those will never go bad. All right. But if a file is sitting on a disk, over time, the disk or the tape can actually, the magnetic material can just go bad, and then you lose your file. So the drawback here is that when you load the file in, it's going to take longer. However, the amount of time that you're probably going to spend, playing these games is still, going to be pretty short, because let's be real, we all have jobs and we all have to do things, and even though we would spend hours and hours back in the 80s and 90s playing these games, it's unlikely that you're gonna, spend, an extraordinary amount of time playing these games. So even if you have to wait, 4, 5, 6 times longer to load up these files, the fact that it's easier to get to this point makes it worth the load time. So, anyways, I'm gonna just load one game here. I've got, obviously some of my favorites would be like Tom Mix's, Donkey King or Donkey Kong. I can't remember the name. Uh, there's just tons of different ones, but the best game companies were definitely Tom Mix, Software. Um, Radio Shack obviously had a lot of cartridge games, and those have been converted over to uh, the WAV files as well. So Tandy, Tom Mix, Intracolor had some pretty good ones. I'm just looking through the list here. Spectral Associates had some good ones. CompuWare, I think those were pretty decent. I'm just trying to remember, off the top of my head here. Tandy. So what I'm going to do, there was one game called Phantom Slayer, I believe. Phantom Slayer right here. Med Systems. It's a pretty short game, and I'm just going to load it in, show you real quick just how this all works, and then we'll pretty much cut the video after we play a little bit. But like I said, get yourself a Coco, get yourself the cable, your cassette cable. Those are cheap, $10. Get yourself a cheap little computer like this guy right here. I mean, you don't need anything powerful. And then find the ROMs. If you can get with the guy that was nice enough to do this for me, great. If not, you just got to manually do it. But anyways, so what you're going to do, I'm going to turn the Coco. Alright, accidentally hit the back button on the Windows phone here, so we had to start the video on portion 2. So anyways, I'm going to turn the Coco off, pull the the cartridge out, turn it back on. Now, I'm going to tell you or recommend that I'm going to recommend that you actually purchase the disc cartridge. And even though you don't have a disc drive, the disc cartridge, see where it says Extended Color Basic? Well, watch this. When you put the disc cartridge in, it gives you what's called Disc Extended Basic. And what I have found, it's kind of hard to do this with one hand. Okay, Disc Extended Basic, Color Basic. What I have found is actually some of the games, when you try to load them off here, even though they're still on, quote, cassette based or wave form, the games won't play. And one in particular was a Clendathu. And I think that game originally came on a disc, so I believe some of the encryption or the encoding or copy protection was actually looking for the Disc Extended Color Basic cartridge. So if you didn't have that in there, you could still load the game, but it actually wouldn't execute when you try to run it. So I'm going to recommend picking one of those up off eBay, because there will be some games that will not run unless you have that in there. So what I'm going to do, real quick and simple here, to load a file, if it's a basic program, you just type in CLOAD for cassette load, and then that would be a basic file. So once you hit enter, you hit the file over here, it's going to play it through the audio output into the cassette thing. And then you're going to type in run. All right, that's a basic file. Now if it's a machine language file, you're going to type in cloadm, okay, and that stands for machine language. And after that's done loading, you're going to type in exec for execute. However, before I do that, just so you can kind of hear what's going on in the real world here, there's a command that the Coco had. It's called audio on and audio off. And what that did is it pretty much piped the sound that was going through the headphone, headphone jack, the input line from the cassette adapter, the cord, right? and you could hear what the cassette was actually putting out, because once you had this plugged in the cassette player, that killed the speaker on the cassette player, and it piped the audio through the line. So you a lot of times back in the day, you would use the command audio on, so you could actually hear what was going on, and that would actually route the sound through the cassette player, through the cable, through the Coco, then to the TV set. So I'm going to type in audio on. Okay, now that just opens the channel from this cable to the TV. Okay, so now I'm going to type in cload M. Okay, now right now you got the little S up there, which stands for searching, and then I'm just going to simply click this, and it's going to come up with I think Windows Media Player. Okay, and then it found Phantom S, which stands for Phantom Slayer. I'm going to turn it up just a little bit. So what you're hearing now, excuse me, is the original data, and I want to say this is like 600 to maybe 1200 baud, so it was pretty slow. But remember, back in the day, these computers, the amount of memory was pretty low, so you know, even though the baud rate was pretty slow on the cassette, it really didn't make much difference, because you know, even the biggest game might load in, you know, 2-3 minutes at the most. So there's something kind of therapeutic about that old noise. So anyways, so once it says OK, just type in EXEC for execute. And we have no sound, which is weird. I'm going to do a reset here on the back. Huh. That's kind of odd. Let's do a quick reload here. So CLOADM. Not sure why we didn't get sound. I'm kind of wondering if I had the audio on. Maybe that actually made it so the game couldn't output the audio. So I actually didn't turn audio on this load. Excuse me. So let's give it a minute here and let it load in. And that's, you know, the drawback. It's not like you could really tell based on what you're hearing when the audio was on, you know, how far along the game load was on the tape. But it was just, I don't know, I guess the fact that you could hear the sound was kind of like the dial-up modems, you know, back in the day when you had 56K or 22.6, whatever it was. On dial-up modem, it was actually nice to be able to listen to the sound for some reason. I think it kind of gave you feedback, you know, as far as, you know, if things were actually working or not. So let's go ahead and try this again, EXEC. And there's our sound. Alright, so this one was kind of like Dungeons of Daggerith. It just wasn't as in depth. You basically are running around this maze and you had to kill these little phantom guys here. So select maze type. I believe maze type 1 would be easy. 2 is more, when I say easy, the corridors would be longer. On maze type 2, if I'm not mistaken, you wouldn't have long corridors, you have a lot more turns in which the phantom could get you easier. Training, T is for training in 1, 2, 3. So obviously training, there's no phantoms in there to kill you. Now it's going to go through its whole thing. So training was just so you could walk around the maze, you could actually look at the map. If I'm not mistaken, the map was random, so it wasn't always the same each time, unlike Dungeons of Daggerith. Alright, so we're going to do 1. And then we're going to do number 1 here again for slow speed. Now it's going to be a little hard because you actually had to use the keyboard up and down, left and right arrows, and then the space bar. There's your map, and you're right in the middle right there. So I might die pretty easy because I'm holding the camera and trying to talk and shoot these guys. So the goal really is to find a corridor. Oh. I hear the guy right now. So he got me from behind. So right there you can see you were right there. The Phantom got me from behind. There was another Phantom, and then that green thing is the map. When you hit the map, it actually would teleport you. You'd see the map for a few seconds, but you'd teleport you back to the center, which really didn't do you a whole lot of good. So I'm going to do this again real quick here. But the one thing about this game that back in the day was kind of freaky is you'd be playing this game, 12 o'clock at night, and it would just be creepy. I mean, oh, there he is. So the first time you hit him, you generally will hit him with one shot, but the next few times he shows up, it's like you have to do 2 shots and then 3. So unless you have a long corridor to kind of back yourself up a little bit, give yourself some space, he's going to run into you and get you. So it's easy to begin. There he is again, so I might have to shoot him twice. He's going to get me. So that's the challenge of this game, is to actually get yourself in a long corridor where you can back up and keep shooting them, because when you start getting 7, 8, 10 kills, you got to hit the guy 7, 8, 10 times, and that's a lot of you need some space to do that, because he comes on you faster than you can actually shoot. So anyways, that's all I have for you. Appreciate you watching this. The color computer, while a lot of people say that it wasn't a very good computer, I disagree with that. It had a lot of very good games. Yeah, if you played basic games, I would agree that the color computer would appear to be a subpar computer compared to like the Commodore 64. But if you played machine language games, there were very good clones out there. I was able to, connect. I'm going to turn this off so we don't have to hear that. Keep going. All right, at least, turn the sound down. I was able to write school papers all the way through college. I connected to BBS systems, chatted, did messages. I downloaded stuff. The color computer is a very capable computer. I would say probably one of the best supported ones. The user groups out there very passionate about the Coco. So, if you have a chance to get a color computer, do it. Even if you had one or not when you're younger, it's just a good quality machine. Very well built. All the ones I have in my museum back in Canton, they all work. I mean, it's not like a lot of the Texas Instruments ones where you got to buy 2 or 3 to get a working one now. They're still going. So the color computer, I would say, compared to all the other ones, quality-wise, was actually above average. So anyways, I appreciate you watching. If you enjoyed the video, do a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Any comments, leave them. Let's do some positive ones. Post your memories, good ones. And thanks for watching. You guys take care and have a good one.